yeah, I guess the purpose basically of this session is to take a look at a practical application for contingency estimation. So taking some of that, what Martin has talked about, and seeing it put into practice, and doing that through a particular product. So we've got the risk module within Oracle Primavera Cloud. So as mentioned, my role is now as product manager for that particular piece. Similar to Martin, I've actually worked in the area for about 15 years. I've only become the product manager in the last few months. I've spent a lot of my time really working as a sales consultant, working across a few different products. So Crystal Ball, which does simulation in Excel. What Martin mentioned earlier, Primavera Risk Analysis, what was previously known as PertMaster. And then more recently, Oracle Primavera Cloud. So I've worked predominantly across those 3 different products, but speaking with customers in a variety of different locations and industries and understanding. And as Werner mentioned, it's great to hear the types of questions. I think AACE-ZA is a brilliant place, right, for getting what is seen as best practice or recommended practices for all these areas. So the agenda that I'm going to run through, quickly touch on the estimation method that we will be looking at, get into some of the details of Monte Carlo simulation, unpack what that really means, introduce the product, run through a demonstration, and touch a little bit also on contingency management. So predominantly we're talking about sizing or estimating of the contingency, but touch a little bit on at least how that might then continue through into project execution and controlling spend of contingency. So as Martin mentioned in his presentation, there were these 4 main areas, 4 main categories of estimation methods. Simulation is the method that we are going to be focusing on here. In particular, looking at the critical path type of model and looking at simulation of that to give an indication of both schedule and cost risk analysis or contingency for your cost contingency, sorry. But also, Werner, at this point, I was going to see if we could run a poll. So we got a simple question here, looking at these 4 methods, just to get a feel for which methods you're maybe using today. And it might be that you're using more than one. I think with the poll, hopefully you can tick more than one if you're using both and maybe doing a hybrid of sorts. Just the one simple question, so I guess it shouldn't take too long, hopefully.
Yeah, let's take another 5 seconds. We've got a good voting rate. And I'm going to close now and share the results. Can you see the results, Dave?
Yep, I can see the results. So it seems we've certainly got a lot of reliance on expert judgment. Hopefully there's lots of guys with grey beards in those organizations. And yeah, I think simulation analysis and parametric analysis look particularly low. So yeah, maybe that's an area that we can maybe look to improve among the people that are in the participants, and some awareness and education and ability to then maybe use some of those other methods which might improve estimates. Okay, it's good, it's interesting. Thanks, Werner. That was my little reminder in case I forgot to do the poll. Okay, so Monte Carlo simulation. So a little bit on the background of how this works, and really a very, very simple example that I think helps understand the point, and also maybe more important if you're explaining this to other people, trying to explain it to other people. So an everyday decision, looking at your daily commute. I say everyday decision, maybe not so much with COVID-19 in the last year or so, but hopefully we're getting back that way for most of us. But let's say your average journey time is 60 minutes and you start work at 9 o'clock. What time should you leave your house? So maybe the initial, the obvious, the simple answer is 8 o'clock. But the key word on here is this point about average, right? 60 minutes is your average journey time. Some days might be a little bit less, sometimes a bit more. What we really need to get a feel for is, what is the variability around that number look like? Are we talking a 59 to 61, a very, very small range? Are we seeing sometimes as quick as 50 and others much later up at an hour and a quarter? So that's the thing we need to help with the decision. The other thing that comes into it really is is what are you doing that day when you get to the office? If it's just a regular day in the office and no one is going to really bat an eyelid if you come in 10, 15 minutes late, then maybe you do just leave at 8 o'clock. But what if you've got a key client meeting first thing? You would want to leave some contingency to ensure you arrive with plenty of time in order to get everything set up, ready to start at 9 o'clock. Maybe you leave 15, 13 minutes earlier, depending on that variability, if you've got a feel for that. And what about if you're headed, instead of going to the office that day, your 60-minute journey is to the airport for a flight? You certainly wouldn't be leaving at 8 o'clock, taking a gamble on whether or not you catch your flight or not, right? So I guess one of the key things here is the bigger the consequence or impact, the more we do about it, the more contingency we set aside, I guess, in this case. And really one of the key things I just want to take away with this example is a lot of the time people are already doing these types of decisions in everyday use. You don't really think of it as I'm doing project risk management or contingency estimation, but you do an element of this in your everyday decision making. If we expand this a little further and look at how we can break it down and start to build a simulation. So we've said we've got 60 minutes. If we start to think about, well, what's the least amount of time that journey can take? Maybe you could look at data over the last month, 3 months, and maybe 55 minutes is the quickest that you've done it in. But what about the worst case number? This is a little bit trickier, right? Maybe over that 3-month period, 70 minutes was the longest it took during that period. But is that really the worst case? What if there's then accidents that maybe close a lane on the motorway? What if your car breaks down? These are the things that we then can classify as risk events. The key difference with a risk event compared to that uncertainty piece is that they have a probability of occurrence. They're not included in that base estimate, but they will have an impact if they occur. The chance of them happening can be very low. Maybe there's only a 5% chance of an accident on the motorway and lane closure. Happens kind of once a month type thing. But if it does happen, maybe you could add a significant amount of time, 20, 30, 40 minutes maybe. In Primavera Cloud today, so this is a screenshot of Primavera Cloud, and we're going to be taking a look at it in a lot more detail later. We can define both that activity uncertainty piece and the risks in the risk register. So if we look at this simple example, we've got the 3 activities. I've switched from driving to taking a walk for 20 minutes, then getting a 30-minute train ride, and then I get the tube, so the London Underground, for 10 minutes. So I've got a nice simple set of numbers that add up to 60 minutes. Train, the piece we're going to focus on to begin with here, is got 30 minutes as its estimate. So first of all, we can define the uncertainty around that estimate. So the day-to-day variation, the noise, the variability piece, systemic risk, if you like. So we've got the train journey, or the train as an activity in our schedule. And we can say that in this particular case, we're going to have a triangular distribution. 28 is the least, 35 is the maximum. In addition to this, we can then capture some risks in our risk register. So I've got here the risk that the train might break down. I've got a probability of only 2%. But if it happens, I'm saying, in this case, I've got a triangular distribution, 30-minute delays most likely, might be as little as only 10, could be as high as an hour. So I've got a significant impact if the train breaks down. I've got another one in here as well for signal failure. Again, small probability of only 5% of occurring. Maybe the impact is somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. So this is in the product where we can define these 2 types of things. And when we talk about simulation, Monte Carlo simulation, and what that really means, all that we do is sample values within that distribution. So if you take the uncertainty piece, in our Gantt bar to begin with, this will have a duration of 30 minutes. I was about to say days. Normally we're talking days, 30 minutes. And when we simulate, we're simply sampling values over and over again from within that triangular distribution that we've set up. So more often closer to the 30 because of the shape of the triangle than in the tails. If we layer risk on top of that, we're doing the same thing in terms of the simulation for the triangular distribution. And then sometimes a risk will occur and add a significantly larger piece to the duration. So all that simulation does is take the values based on your inputs. In this particular case, we're looking at that from a single activity. We can see the sampled values for that single activity, and then we build that up into the full schedule. So we've been focused on train. We're also doing the same for our walk. Maybe there's a small amount of variability in my walking speed. And then the tube as well, right? It can have its own distribution. And obviously in this case, 3 simple activities, one after another. The journey to work is simply the sum of those. If it was a more detailed critical path where maybe you've got some things that are in parallel, when we need to take into account that full schedule logic. So we sample the values, we run the schedule logic. In this case, we're adding them up to see what the total project delay looks like. And we might do that 1,000, we might do that 5,000 times, picking values from within those ranges and seeing what that does to my project. So that's a little bit just on Monte Carlo simulation, and it feeds in obviously to this schedule risk analysis process. We're basically just capturing uncertainty in activity durations, capturing those risks and connecting them into the schedule, and then simulating it to see the effect on your project overall. So we're going to go in and take a look at how that works in the product. I'm just going to set the scene a little bit with Oracle Primavera Cloud and what the product does. So you might be familiar with the Primavera name. We've been building solutions around project scheduling and in particular and risk around that for more than 30 years. And this is around the planning, building and operating of critical assets from a planning and a risk perspective, as we're talking about, but also looking at resourcing on your projects as well. One of the things that I want to mention and how it kind of feeds into the product and how it's a little bit different to some of the older products is this whole idea of collaboration and the size and scale of projects. So this is some data that we have through our Oracle AConnect solution. This is data for a typical construction and engineering project. You can see you've got more than 1,000 users from not far off 200 companies across 6 different countries, all involved. You might also typically get a significant increase in the number of participants as you go through the project. So not so many at the start in early stage feasibility, and then obviously building up through to when you're working in execution. So given the size and scale of collaboration between different parties in your projects, it is maybe not that sensible to still be using desktop solutions, right? And this is where Primavera Cloud is different. So whether you're talking about schedule, whether you're talking about risk, this is a true cloud solution. So you can give access to anyone working on the project, from the client or the owner, from design consultants and architects, through to the main contractor, the general contractor, through to all your different subcontractors or anyone involved in that delivery team. So as a cloud provider, we handle security and access. You simply decide which companies and which users, which projects they need access to, and with what permissions. Have they got permission to edit, view only, etc. And one of the things that this changes in particular well is collaboration across company boundaries, right? As a modern application, we've got things like a discussions feature that you can do on any activity, any risk, any project. This type of chat capability gives people the ability to ask simple questions and get a response from people who are working also directly in the tool. It means any of those discussions are captured directly in the system and available for all to see rather than maybe in separate email chains, right? You can also tag someone in a discussion and it'll send them an alert via an email, right? To ask a question of a specific user. So Primavera Cloud is a collaborative enterprise level solution. As mentioned, it covers schedule as well. So it's not just a risk tool. So whether you've got as on the left-hand side here, your critical path type of scheduling, or your more short-term lean task management, more your post-it notes type of what am I doing in the next week type of planning, it can cover both of those. It also will even cover portfolio management, helping you make decisions, especially for owner type of organizations, mining companies, utilities, etc. What are the different projects that I should be taking, making that decision up front, and then tracking and monitoring those projects and portfolios as you go through execution. And obviously it's got the risk capability as well. I'm going to go into that more in a moment. And where we're trying to help with this particular solution overall is to try and get away from the current situation that we see in a lot of places where data is in different silos, it's not connected, no one necessarily knows where to go for the latest information, it's often out of date, you've often got different Excel versions, and by the time you get access to the right information, you've moved on a month to a single place where you can go, and whether it's schedule or risk information, whether it's looking at dashboards and reports, that are based on that, it's just another place to go within the same application. So there's a lot of different functionality within Primavera Cloud. This is a site map, gives you a feel for the different pieces. Obviously, risk and schedule are the main ones we're going to be focusing on. Cost is also in there. And while there's a lot of different pieces in that, you can tailor it. So if you've got someone who's just looking at risk and schedule risk, maybe you just set it up so that down that left-hand side is where you access the different apps. So maybe dashboarding might be useful. Really, risk and schedule are the main ones they're going to be using, and maybe they might run some reports at the back end as well. So it's certainly configurable to who the user is. So from a risk management perspective, situation that we often see at a lot of different companies, right? You've got a group of people who are looking after the plan, your planners and schedulers, focused on the duration and how long the project is going to take. You often have another group of people who are looking after the cost estimates, maybe in a specialist estimating tool, more often than not in Excel. And then you normally have your risk managers, your risk analysts working on risk, again, sometimes in its own tool, again, risk registers especially, often just in Excel. And with all these three working in silos, feeding their information in their different tools, Excel maybe being the most common one, up to the project manager, it can be difficult to just answer a simple question, right? How much contingency should we allocate to this particular project? The project manager has all the information maybe that they have, but not in the way that works for them, right? I've got a plan here in Primavera P6, and I've got a risk register with 30 risks on, and 10 of them are red. So you've got your risk information, you've got your schedule information, you've got your cost information, but you can't really answer the question. And the aim that we're trying to do is bring those three pieces of information together into the one single place to help answer that question in a better manner, right? So how much contingency should we set aside? To be 90% confident of having enough contingency, we should be looking at 425,000, and then be able to show why and back that up, and which risks are contributing most, etc. So that is the broad aim of the product. And how we do that is a product that goes kind of through the full risk life cycle. So you've got things like the PMI risk management process across the bottom. You've got ISO 31000 on here as well. Go through all those steps, not just the quantitative piece, but the capture and identification of those risks, where you put in your risk responses, how you monitor and control as you go through. We've got a way that allows you to score your risks. So this risk scoring matrix is used for both qualitative and can be the starting point of your quantitative risk analysis, helps you to standardize. So you can set your particular thresholds. So you can see the probability threshold, schedule threshold down here, a very high impact I'm saying is going to add between 40 and 80 days, down to very low is anything up to 5 days. And then you put that schedule together with a cost and a similar probability threshold into a matrix. And then you can use those matrices on all your projects. Maybe all your large projects have one matrix, maybe all your small projects have another, but it allows you to get some standards as you go through the process. Risk register itself, we're going to see quite a bit of this in the demo in a minute, so let me leave that for now. And touch on also, for example, we also have weather modeling. So in short, this can add another type of risk alongside your more typical threats and opportunities. You can say I've got maybe the possibility of wet weather on my project, and define for particular periods throughout the year, maybe by month, maybe by season, how much additional downtime I might have. So it works a little bit different from your threats and opportunities, because it's now the number of non-working days within a specific period on that calendar that you're really simulating. And we can see visually what that does to your calendar, how likely you are or not to have additional non-working time through that. And we can see things like the tornado chart at the end, which we'll see more of later. You can see those weather risks alongside your other multiple threats and opportunities as well. These are the types of outputs that we can get. We've got the histogram and tornado type of output. In particular, if we look at a histogram, we're looking at things like the overall finish date. Let me leave here and jump into the demonstration. I think is probably better. We will see these in a bit more detail as we go through, rather than just in PowerPoint. So I'm going to start off here first of all on my schedule. So here I've got my my typical Gantt chart. I'm working within a particular project. So within Primavera Cloud, this is where I would choose and go to a different project or a program or portfolio. And on the left, as you maybe saw, this is where I can navigate to some of the different applications within the product. I've actually got a couple of different tabs. If I jump to the other tab, I've got the risk register already open just on another tab. And here I'm back to the Gantt. So first of all, I've got my overall project schedule, and I can see this particular project. I've already got a few activities that have started. I'm running for another year and a quarter roughly through to this finish date of the 25th of August. I can switch my view in here. So this is my basic Gantt view. I've got another view on here that I've got called duration uncertainty. If I just switch that view, let me just move back across to the upcoming activities. So I've taken out my WBS. I'm just looking at activity level information in here now. And let's pick maybe a particular activity here that's one of the larger ones. So this activity to detail, fabricate and deliver steel, I'm saying is going to take 30 days. The planner or scheduler has put in an estimate that says that's what they think it will take. But of course, any number, any forward-looking number in any sort of plan or is really an estimate. And there's a level of uncertainty around that. Here is where we can capture that activity uncertainty piece that we saw on the slides earlier, really your kind of systemic risk. And I can say that I want to instead have a triangular distribution, and I'm going to go between 27 and 39. Maybe the 30 I'm going to keep as my most likely estimate. But this is one source that is going to drive, as we saw, the variability that we see as we go through the Monte Carlo simulation. If I then switch to the risk register, this is where I can list my specific risk events that might happen over and above that. So if I take a look, for example, at risk number 2 in here, I'm saying there's a risk of a brick supply shortage. I can capture some of the more textual information, the cause, the description, the effect as to what that really means. So there's no ambiguity. And then I can capture, based on those thresholds that have been set up and applied to this project, what do I think is the probability of this particular risk occurring? If it occurs, what is the impact on schedule? So saying medium probability, 20 to 40 days can be added. And I've also got what is the cost impact if this particular risk occurs. For most of these other, I can see there a selection from a range. I can see actually for this particular risk, I've specified a bit more specifically, if you can specify more specifically, a single point value. So you can use those ranges as a starting point if you want to come in and be more precise. I don't know, maybe you've got something like risk of a part failing, and you know the cost of that replacement part is an exact value. You don't necessarily want to then put a range on there, but be able to come in and specify that number. Or you can still again go for a triangular distribution and put the exact numbers in here. The other thing we do, I'm just going to switch views again. So this is my qualitative risk analysis. And actually, before I leave the qualitative risk analysis, the two outputs that we get. So these are all my user input fields: probability, impact and schedule, impact on cost. I've got this exposure value. This is like your expected value. It is no more than the cost value multiplied by the probability, the center of the range, if I've got a range on here. And that gives me an indication of the size of the cost. And some people, as mentioned, can maybe use this for contingency, but we're going to go a step further. And it will also give me a score, a way to help prioritize the risks on here. But we're going to move a step further and go to quantitative risk analysis. The key thing in particular that we do at this point is we also connect risks to activities. So if this risk does occur, this brick supply shortage, these will be the two activities that will be impacted. So from a schedule perspective, if I get an extra 20 to 40 days, it will be these activities that suffer the consequences and get delayed. While in here as well, maybe just one or two other things. So that, as mentioned, this is an enterprise solution, right? Anyone with a browser has got access to this, as they've got the right permission. We're not in a desktop solution. I can be collaborative, as we mentioned, in nature as well, right? This is that little discussion icon that we mentioned, where you can ask the question around, why do we have high on here? And you can tag people, and maybe those people can then come back and give some justification as to why that is. We've also got the ability to quickly search. So maybe you've got a much bigger risk register and you're trying to find a risk quickly. I can just key in and it will do a quick filter within that project. If you're not building your house or your construction with brick, like the little three pigs, you're using maybe straw instead. There's a search on here as well that also allows you to look to see if you've got risks across your entire database now, right? So this global search up at the top, you can key in any word, you can look for risks that have happened on any other project as well. So you've got search within the page and search across all of your history. We'll see a little bit more on how that history can be used as well in a moment. But basically, having set up all of our information, having defined the sizes of these risks, quantified them, connected to them to activities, we can run our simulation. And that would be achieved by just clicking on Run Risk Analysis. Here is where you can define the number of activities, number of iterations that you're going to run for. If you want to look at pre or post, is just an option in here. And is it P10 and P90 that you're particularly interested in for your pessimistic percentile? You can define that here. I've already ran the analysis just to save a little time. So here is one of the main outputs, right? So here I'm looking at my distribution results at the moment for the finish date and for the entire project. And I guess some of the key things to look at on here is I can see the range of different finish dates across the bottom here on my chart. I can see, remember our schedule was due to finish 25th of August. I've just got that displayed here. And what is the probability of me achieving that? So I've got 16%. What's that? Roughly a 1 in 6 chance of finishing on time. So would you want to still go ahead with that as your plan, stating that particular date to senior management if you're a contractor, committing to build by that date if you've got such a low probability? We can see things like P10, P50, P90 date. Instead, my P90 date I can see is not far off 3 months later, 10th of November, which is 54 days later, working days according to the calendar on the project. And I can look at that same type of output for finish date and also for cost as well. So I can get contingency both from a schedule perspective and I can get contingency from a cost perspective. This is really looking at your net cost. So what is the contribution from risk? So the deterministic here we're looking at is 0. So really this is what is the chances of coming in under that. In other words, I've got some opportunities on this particular project, and maybe there's a chance that I can come in a little bit lower in cost overall. I've also got my P90 date, and I can see for the contingency is obviously just the same as the P90 given we're comparing to 0. So I can see in this case, I've got 427,000 roughly of contingency on this project. If I want to have 90% confidence level, so Martin talked about a probabilistic type of output and being able to convey that. So these are the numbers that you can use and the chart that you can use to help with that, right? The other thing that I can look at is contribution. So I'm going to look at this chart here called risk removal impact. I've got this, let's go pre-response first. I've got pre-response, again, from a finish date and from a cost perspective. So these numbers are really calculated by running multiple versions of the simulation. So we run the Monte Carlo simulation for the entire project with all the risks included. And then we took out each of the risks one by one. When risk 2 was not included in the simulation, that pessimistic, that P90 finish date was close to 10 days earlier. So this value that we see here for risk 2 is the difference between 2 different Monte Carlo simulations. One where all the risks are in, one where all the risks except for risk 2 are in, and therefore we can get an easier way to describe the impact. If we were to remove risk 2 completely, we could finish about 10 days earlier. And I can see that also from a cost perspective. I can see in this particular case, risk 2 is very dominant here when it comes to the size of the contribution for the cost perspective. The other thing that you will have probably noticed right up at the top here, from a finish date, I've also got, this is really my systemic risk, right? My activity uncertainty. So those triangular distributions that I had applied to my activities, they're really having more impact than any of my different risks on here. So it gives me another angle that I might want to consider and take a look at. And one of the key steps that you will typically take, having looked at this type of output, is knowing that risk number 2 and then 3 are the biggest contributors. And as we saw, especially from a cost perspective, I might want to go back and look at what I could do about that. What are the mitigation actions? What are the risk response plans that I could put in place to try and improve the situation? So first of all, just before I switch views again, you will see those numbers from the tornado chart are also back here in your risk register, right? So absolutely the visual tools I think are helpful, but you can also have those numbers, having ran the analysis beyond here to help with your prioritization. These are all sorted in terms of that cost contribution. If I flip views again and we start to think about risk response planning. So staying with this particular risk for risk number 2, I've now got 3 columns that I saw before for pre-response, probability, impact on schedule, impact on cost, and also now for post-response. I can see there are 3 different risks here where I've got some sort of response in place, and I can see what I think will be the probability, impact on schedule, impact on cost if I put that response plan in place. So I can size the impact. I can also detail down at the bottom here the particular response actions. So for this risk around the brick supply shortage, my response action that I'm going to take is to source an alternative supplier. So I'm going to have a backup so we can immediately switch in the case of a shortage. These response actions can have different statuses. They can be proposed maybe while you're just deciding, should I carry out this action or not? When you get to the point where you've made the decision that yes, you want to carry them out, you can sanction them, and really you can then build them into your plan. So in this particular case, this one is sanctioned. It's actually already been put into the plan. If I look at A1000, source alternative supplier, this is now entered as a regular activity within the rest of my schedule. So rather than having a separate exercise where you're having to try and track response actions as part of your risk management process, your monthly process, if you've made the decision that you're going to go ahead and carry out those actions, really they should become part of your regular schedule, part of your normal plan, and tracked and progressed in the same way as all the rest of your activities. So having gone through this process, having logged your response actions, we can also take a look at, well, what difference did that make, right? So whether we're looking at finish dates, previously we were looking at the pre-response, and remember we had a 16% chance of finishing on time, 54 days of contingency. If I flip that to look at post-response, I can see the probability of me finishing on time has shot up from 16 to 57%. I've gone from, I think it was 54 days down to less than 40, right? So certainly a reasonable improvement. If I look at that from a cost perspective, then again, I can see pre-response, I was looking at 427,000 of contingency. My post-response, I can see is almost bang on 100,000. So certainly huge benefit in putting those response plans in place. This is the type of information that you can use to help justify and therefore get sanctioning for those response actions, right? And having gone through that process, you could again look at your risk removal impact. Remember, we saw risk number 2 was huge from a cost and also high from a finish date perspective. In that post-response position, risk 2 is now dropped off the chart in here, right? So then iterative process, I might then start to look at risk 3 on here. And again, looking at it from a cost and both a finish date perspective as well. So as you're going through this process, obviously a lot of this, as Martin mentioned, is determined by having the right people doing the job, having someone who knows this process, who knows what they're doing. It is also a lot dependent on obviously these values that you select. Why was 325,000 put in here for that brick supply shortage, given it's a huge contributor, right? And in the same way that we talked about being able to search and look across your historical data, one of the big advantages about getting all your information, all of your risk information across all of your projects into the one same place is the ability to look across that data. So here we've got some dashboards that are now at what we call in Primavera Cloud the workspace level. So looking across all of your projects that sit in that workspace. A workspace might be could be just your entire company, so it could be all your projects, or you might split it out by different divisions, etc. It might be all your CapEx projects that are in here. But we've now got some views that are looking at your risk history across all your projects. And if I focus on this particular chart up at the top, first of all, so this is my impacted risks. So these are risks that have happened on previous projects. You can see there's some color coding here for the 3 projects that I've got as history in here. And you can see in particular, if I look at risk ID down the side, I can see there's one risk ID in particular that tends to be common and stands out compared to all the others, right? And I can maybe drill in. I can see in particular on project number 2, it hit me for 750,000, and I can drill in and see the specifics and get confirmation of the numbers. What was the particular risk that occurred, when it happened, and confirmation of its size in here, right? And a key, sorry, one other thing on here. So this is looking at the size of the impact. I can also use things like the risk status to give an indication of how often a particular risk has occurred, right? So I can see all these yellow are where the risk is still open on those particular projects, but I can see again where there's either risks that were not applicable in gray and were rejected, or I can see in red the more troublesome pieces where I had risks that impact. And again, I can see, I think this is that same one, 407, where it's happened on 3 of the 4 different projects. So again, when I'm looking at probability of a risk occurring, I can look back to see how often it's occurred on projects from my history to help drive that discussion, to help inform me. A lot of this comes about by being able to have this common risk ID. So when you're creating a new project within this particular workspace, one of the things that you can do is you can use a template. So if I just create a new project on the fly, I can say that I want to copy from, and I can go into here and I can say I've got a template that I want to use within my particular company. This is what that template looks like. And when you're selecting, you can choose, is it the schedule that you want to bring over, the resources, risk information, is it both the risks and that activity uncertainty? So you can build a project pretty quickly with a lot of that information already in there, right? Both in terms of your your work breakdown structure and schedule that you're going to run through, and also the risks that you might have on that project. So the project, I think, just popped up to say it's been quickly created. Here's my new project on the fly. And if we go straight to the risk app and looking at this particular project, this is where we could then start going through the process. So the one big benefit out of this is you get that common risk ID. So this is certainly a process that a lot of people have started to use. 4.07, that big risk that we saw from those charts. I can see it's on here, it's proposed. I would then be saying, okay, does it apply to this project or not? And if it doesn't apply to this project, I could just go and reject it immediately. Else I would open it, and then I'd start to go through the process that we saw before in terms of sizing it, etc. But this approach allows you to get these types of outputs that we saw from the looking across all of your history. Let me go back. I know I got probably not too much time. I'm going to quickly touch on one other area. So hopefully that's given you a reasonable feel for how Primavera Cloud can be used from a risk perspective and for helping size contingency. There's another app. We saw this sitemap earlier. We've seen risk and schedule quite a bit. There is also a cost app within that. You've got the ability to create a project budget and then use a workflow to review and approve that budget. All the costs can be organized by your company's cost breakdown structure. It's got a cash flow, which allows you to look at the spread of that cost in terms of time, the different fiscal periods when that cost is going to occur. It's got a project cost sheet that allows you to bring all your cost sources together. So your budget information, actual costs as they occur, information from the risk as well would all come together into that cost sheet. And you can also do things like budget transfers, right? So as you start to go through project execution, budget transfers would maybe be the place that you could use when a particular risk occurs, right? And I need to spend a significant amount of money. I'm going to move money from my contingency bucket to wherever that particular risk needs it. So we've got a cost application. We talked a bit about the risk management process already. That process is often cyclical and iterative, and it's carried out at different stages of your overall project life cycle. Certainly carried out as mentioned towards the end of maybe FEL 3 before you give your overall approval and before you give the go ahead to fund and execute a project. Once you're then in execution, revisiting that risk process is also pretty key, and carrying it out at different, whether that's a monthly or a quarterly cadence, or as you hit particular stages as you go through. And just want to talk a little bit for kind of the benefit of doing this, right? So we've talked about looking at running that type of risk analysis to getting the size of the contingency you should set aside. So let's say you've gone through that process, you've done it well, you've got 380,000 roughly that you're going to set aside on the project. So you sign off your project with that level of funding, and then you go through your project execution, you start work. And when you get to a particular point, maybe you're halfway through the project here, right? If you're managing your contingency in the tool as well, you can keep track of exactly how much of that 380 you've spent so far. And I know that in itself is often a difficult question for people to answer, right? We had 380 at the start of the project. How much have we spent? Not every customer who can always, or user who can always answer that question. If you're also keeping all of your risk register up to date, which risks have occurred and are now maybe closed out because they've already impacted, which are maybe just no longer relevant, they cannot impact because of the particular point you've got to in the project. You keep your risk register up to date, you rerun your risk analysis rather than the 380 that you thought you needed at the start. Now you only need 100. So you get to this particular situation where you had 380 signed off, you've spent 180 of it, but you only need 100. So we've got a difference here. Get the numbers nice and easy. We've got a difference of 100. And really, if you're able to quantify these two numbers well and keep on track, you can be fairly confident. I've got 100 that is just spare that's on this particular project. And then same can apply as you move further through the project lifecycle. And really what happens in a lot of instances is once contingency is put into a project, it's locked away in there, right? There's not many times you hear project managers waving their hands and shouting up and down saying, I've got lots of spare money in my project that I don't need anymore, right? Just doesn't typically happen. But using this tool, you can get assistance, as you've seen, with the contingency estimate up front and tracking that spend so that you can get to this point where you are confident that you have got spare contingency and you can then return it to the business. And as Martin mentioned his slides, that can obviously be then used elsewhere to help fund other projects rather than have contingency layered and sat in projects not being used. And one of the questions that often comes up when looking at this particular type of view here is, okay, but what's the chances of this happening, right? What is the chances of getting to this particular point in the project and having these two numbers here be less than what you originally signed up for? What's the chances of having spare? And the good thing is, if you use this process, that's up to you, right? You can determine the chances. You set, is it the P80, is it the P90 that you want to use at the outset? So if you set it as your P80, there's an 80% chance you get here and you've got spare. And if you think about that from a portfolio context, that means you've maybe got 8 projects that do have some blue on here. They do have some spare, and they can be freeing that up, returning that back to the business to what is often that management reserve that was mentioned. Knowing that, yeah, you will have maybe some projects, 20% chance that those projects are going to need some of that money as well, right? So this, I'm not going to go any further on that, I don't think, because I'm starting to run out of time a little bit, but this also gives you a feel for how you can not only size that contingency, but how you can track that through execution as well. But I'm going to jump at that point because I'm a little bit concerned of time. I've obviously been talking a little bit too much. And I'm going to go to just wrap up on here. So hopefully you've got a feel for how we've can run through this process. We talked about Monte Carlo simulation, to look a bit of a look at Oracle Primavera Cloud and seeing how that works, and also got into the subject a little bit here of contingency management. And at this point, Werner, I would like, if we can, to run the next poll.
Sure, Dave, I'll launch the last poll for you.
Thank you. So basically, very, very similar question to what we asked at the start. At the start, we asked, what method are you using today? And the question now is just from a slightly different angle. Given what you have learned today from what Martin ran through and maybe what you've just seen here, which contingency estimating methods would you be likely to use in future? And again, you can select more than one if you wish. I'd be interested to compare versus before. Should have took a screenshot of before. I remember expert judgment was top by a long way in the 60s, if I remember rightly.
Yes. Because I'm going to give another 5 seconds and then close the poll. Okay, we've got about 50% votes, so sharing the results. Dave, you've managed to convince people that the simulation modeling is actually achievable.
And parametric modeling has gone up a lot as well, which is good. So there's a little bit of a shift. Still 42% are going to do expert judgment, but I guess expert judgment, I mean, maybe comes into those as well, right? I mean, simulation modeling, parametric modeling is very much dependent on an expert judgment as well. So I'd like to hope the 8 people that did put expert judgment, that was as part of choosing one of the others as well. But I guess we can't see that completely from the way the survey is done.
Fortunately not.
No.
Dave, we have many questions, but we do have a comment from May. Can you see the Q&A on your side, Dave?
I'm just stopping sharing and going to pull it up. Yeah. So we've got a comment on here, just a comment, great features being able to toggle between cost and schedule graphs from a single platform. Love the risk removal impact feature. Will help when you want to check cost contribution and assess impact should you want to transfer risk. Yep, absolutely. I think, yeah, it's the aim. Try and get it all into the one place. So It's good, yeah, and absolutely.
Two questions from my side. You obviously work with lots of customers on the risk management side. Have you seen many people transition from Excel to this new platform, Primavera Cloud? And sort of what benefits have you seen those organizations achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I can't remember if I mentioned, but one of the things that you can do in the risk register is you can do an import from Excel as well. So I'd say quite often the biggest place that people are moving from is Excel. And that can be something that you can use to help get started quickly. And certainly, yeah, we've a number of customers now that have headed down that route and are seeing that benefit. And maybe one of the benefits, so I showed one of them there, which is the ability to look over your historic data, I think is a big one. A second one from a customer, which is actually Oracle internally. So Oracle are looking to use Primavera Cloud for risk as well, where in a lot of places we were just using it in Excel. And maybe one of the learnings from that's quite an interesting one as well. So with Excel, it's very easy to make mistakes just keying in data, right? Or not even necessarily keying it in. And the example that we had two risks in the risk register, risk 1 and risk 2. Let's say risk 1, it had what is the financial impact if it occurs, and it was the number 5 million. And that number was formatted in Excel so that you can see the dollar sign, you can see the comma, the decimal. There was another risk right next to it that happened to be exactly the same size, also 5 million. But that person had typed in the dollar, then the 5, then typed in the comma, etc. And it means that in Excel, that is text and not a number. So when you do some simple formulas, even if it's just adding up those values in your Excel file, right? Those text values get skipped completely. If you've got, like this customer had, this organization within Oracle had summary views, right? What is the size of the risk overall? What is it by region? What is it by country, etc.? All those type of sum if calculations as well. Just completely missed that. So it might seem quite a simple thing, but it's just one of the things that can be a challenge if you're just using Excel. Obviously, Primavera Cloud, it doesn't let you put text into a field that's a number, right? So just by the way it confirms the data on entry, then you can't make that type of simple mistake.
Yeah, there's another question from Greg in the Q&A section, Dave.
Yep, Greg Ramsey. Hi Dave, good presentation. Does the software have probabilistic and condition branching and also risk factors functionality? No doubt you would be expecting, is there an option for this as a standalone product? Also interested in the next steps in terms of AI machine learning aspects. Okay, yeah, good questions, Greg. So yeah, this is, so yeah, as you might have seen, if you're familiar with Primavera Risk Analysis, there's a lot of similarity in here, but now in a more modern and enterprise, a cloud solution. It's got a lot of the capability that was in Primavera Risk Analysis, but not all of it yet. And certainly one of my jobs is, now that I'm in product management, is to help prioritize those things and which ones need to come next. So at the minute, risk factors is not in there, but is something we're actually working on the design of at the moment. And that's where these type of sessions are good. If you've got other feedback that we want to get into in more detail, we happen to have those discussions as well. But yeah, those are some of the things that are still working on the design of, and that will be in future releases. On the AI and the machine learning piece, so obviously you saw the ability to look across your data in a dashboard. I think I would like very much to be able to provide that information directly within the risk register. So when you're highlighting risk number 2 on brick supply, you can see where that similar risk is applied just in the details down at the bottom. So similar to that information, but down below, and also within the kind of wider applications that we have. So we have another application called CIC, we refer to customer. Werner, CIC, go on.
Construction Intelligence Cloud.
Thank you. Construction Intelligence Cloud. And that is an AI machine learning application that goes across all of your past project data, risk data, schedule data. It'll even look at other applications like AConnect, for example, another application that we have in our environment. And it will give predictions either at the project level, or I think will be more useful at the activity level, to then feed into your schedule risk analysis. So when you're looking at the size of that activity uncertainty, rather than someone just picking a triangle and picking those min and max values, having that be driven by AI and machine learning modeling. So that is the direction that we're headed. And I think, yeah, certainly gives us some interesting options. So the AI machine learning product is available. The connection into risk is not there yet, but is kind of where we're headed.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. We've only got a couple of minutes. How will people find more information? Where can they go to find more information about the product?
Yeah, about the product. So certainly just a quick search on Oracle Primavera Cloud, you will get our website pop up. And also if you go into YouTube, there's a number of short little videos in YouTube. There's if you search Oracle Primavera Cloud Risk, I think there's something like a 5-minute overview. There's other ones that go into quantitative analysis in a bit more detail as well. So I think certainly videos are a good way to get that information. And yeah, I mean, if anyone does want to as well, they can certainly reach out to me through LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way. I don't know if we've got our information on here in a minute. Dave Hamill. Hopefully my spelling is on there. It's Hamill like mammal, not like camel. If you're trying to find it, as long as you can spell it right, there's not many people with the same spelling of surname. And if you can't spell it right, then maybe you'll speak to some people about some camels or something instead. But